Welcome to the Wickedly Branded podcast, and we are talking all about the magic of repetition in the Marketing for Entrepreneurs Revised Edition, the quick guide to sparking ignite your marketing. I'm Beverly Cornell, the founder here at Wickedly Branded. There is a moment, I believe, that happens in business that almost no one, I believe, talks about. You write something that feels deeply honest, you share a belief you've held for years, and you finally say it out loud in public, in front of everyone. And after you hit publish, you sit there wondering whether you've already said it before, whether people are tired of hearing about it or whether you sound just repetitive. You might even feel a little bit vulnerable because it is something that's actually important to you, but you've said it a few times, a few different ways. I know this moment really well. I've sat at my desk with a warm cup of coffee, rereading a post and thinking, didn't I already talk about this? And the truth is, yes, I probably did. Because the things that matter most in our work tend to circle back around again and again. What I've learned over nearly 3 decades in branding conversations is this: the ideas that build real businesses are rarely brand new. They are familiar truths that said consistently enough that people begin to recognize them as yours. They become your brand promise because you've said them over and over again. And repetition carries more power than novelty ever could for humans and the way our brains are wired. And yet so many thoughtful, capable entrepreneurs feel a quiet tension around repeating themselves. They want to sound fresh, have a new angle. They want to prove depth. They want to offer something new every time they show up. That instinct actually does make sense, especially if you care about doing meaningful work. But what I see underneath that instinct is this: you value substance. You value thoughtfulness, and you want your words to matter every time you share them. And what experience has taught me over these years is that words begin to matter when they are encountered more than once. The pattern I keep seeing is that in client conversations, I often hear something like this: I already talked about that. I don't want to sound redundant. I need a new angle. Then I'll ask a simple question: did your audience hear it the first time? So what I see in social media and even in email marketing is, let's say you have a 30% open rate in your emails. There's 70% of people who haven't even heard it, right? And in social media, maybe 3 to 5% of your audience is being shown that content. So 95% of your audience has not seen those words. And if they have seen those words, if you think that they can quote you because paying that much attention to your content, probably not. Because in reality, your audience lives inside a busy world. They scroll between school pickups and board meetings, and they skim emails while standing in line at the bank, and they listen to podcasts while they're folding laundry. Your message enters a life that is already very full, very noisy. So familiarity creates recognition. Recognition creates that level of safety, and safety creates that trust. We've talked about that a few times already. But when someone encounters your belief once, they notice it maybe. But when they encounter it again and again in a slightly different story, a different angle, it begins to be internalized and settle inside of them. When they hear it a third time through a client example, it becomes associated with you. Over time, your ideas start feeling like content and start feeling with this idea of grounded orientation. They start looking for you for that particular topic and content. And that is when the brand magic really begins to show up. And it shows up in small ways. A client may say, I've heard you say that before. A podcast listener may mention, that thing you always talk about finally clicked in my brain. And a prospect begins this discovery call by repeating your own language back to you. And that moment feels electric. It's so fun when a client will talk about magic with me, when they use those words, or the messy middle, or the should suitcase, when they repeat some of those terms back at me. The flying monkeys of distraction is one that I get all the time. That's amazing. And that is only built through repetition. Very rarely will you ever make that kind of impression one time. So what repetition actually does, what does it actually do? So when you repeat a core belief, you are doing something deeply profound. You are signaling that you are trustworthy, that you are steady, that you are grounded, that you are who you say you are. You are signaling a commitment to that particular practice or craft. And you are signaling that this idea has deep roots because you can talk about it in all different ways. Our brains are wired to relax around familiarity. We lean toward what feels consistent, and we trust what feels predictable in tone and in belief. You've experienced this yourself. I know you have. Think about the brands that you trust the most, the mentors that you return to, the authors that you reread. They circle the same core beliefs again and again in different stories and through different seasons. Repetition deepens identity, and identity is what carries your momentum. So in the brand magic method, repetition is part of Blaze. This is the phase where you stay long enough for your message to develop muscle memory in your audience. It is less about saying more. It is about staying with what matters. I worked with an accountant once who casually said during a strategy call that we're not your father's accountant. It was a throwaway line in her mind. But for me, everything shifted when she said that because it held an edge. It held a point of view and a signal about who she was and how she worked. And they have tattoos and they have pink hair and they are fun and sassy. And they're not your father's accountant. Truly, from the inside out. That phrase was buried deep in her website at the time and tucked into a paragraph that few people will probably ever actually read fully. So we brought it forward. It became her headline. It became her email signature. It became the first line in every single one of her webinars, every single one of her talks. And within weeks, clients were quoting it back to her, and the kind of clients that she wanted to get. Roller rinks and amusement parks and tattoo parlors. So what changed? The belief never changed for her. It always was there, underlying this current that she had. But what changed was repetition. We taught them how to think about her. That phrase began to anchor her brand in a way it never was before. And over time, it stopped feeling like marketing and started feeling like their actual identity, which it was. That is the magic of repetition. What I see is a lot of emotional resistance around repeating yourself. If you feel a hesitation about repeating your ideas, I want to gently name that what might be underneath all of that. There is often a desire to prove growth, to demonstrate evolution, and to show that you have a range. Growth does matter, and evolution does matter. Do not get me wrong. All that's important. And growth does not require abandoning your core beliefs, though. It requires you deepening. I love the idea of roots. And like the tree that is thin, but the tree that is thick has the biggest, deepest roots, right? And when you repeat your idea through a new story, you expand those roots. When you revisit a belief after a year of lived experience, you mature it. And when you circle back to something you wrote 2 years ago and say it was way steadier language and a better analogy, your audience can feel the difference. So repetition breeds and builds credibility because it reveals continuity, and continuity helps build that trusting. So how do you identify what is worth repeating for your business and for who you are and how you show up? There are a few simple ways to recognize your repeatable message. First, I want you to listen to yourself in conversation. What do you say naturally when someone asks you what you do? What do you return to when a client feels overwhelmed? And what belief do you circle back to in almost every single strategy call you have? Those phrases are your anchors. Next, I want you to review your content from the past 6 months. Highlight the ideas that feel most like you, the ones that still resonate when you reread them, and the ones that make you exhale when you hit publish, the ones you are so excited to share with the world. These are not old posts. These are the foundations for your marketing and your branding and your messaging. Third, I want you to notice what clients reflect back to you. When someone says, "You always remind me X," pay attention. Your repeatable message is often already alive and living and organic and breathing. It just simply needs more visibility. This week, I want you to choose one core belief, one sentence that feels central to your work. For example, momentum builds through staying. Familiarity builds trust. Presence carries more weight than performance. These are all things that I say all the time. Write one short post expanding on that belief through a story. Could be a client story, your lived experience. And next week, share a client example that reflects the same belief. So build on it. Take a different angle of it, but still share the same belief. The following week, a frequently asked question that connects back to that same belief. You now have built a 3-part rhythm around that one anchor. So we call those anchors content pillars. And most businesses have between 4 and 6 content pillars that they should stay in, become known for, and all content should revolve around those things. So your audience then begins to associate you with those truths, those content pieces, that particular part of your work. And over time, that association becomes your reputation, how you are known. And that makes people easier to refer you out too, because if you're like, "Oh, that's not my father's accountant." Oh, and then someone says, "Oh, my accountant's so, I just can't stand it. They're so boring." If they just, whatever. You say, "I know the perfect accountant for you. You have to go check these people because they are not your father's accountant." It allows them words to use to refer to you to and to know exactly who you are and how you serve. So why does this all matter for the long game, for the importance of longevity in your business? Blaze is the phase where most entrepreneurs experience the quiet power of staying. Spark connects you to what matters, and Ignite helps you choose how to show up. But Blaze invites you to remain steady. Reputation is the muscle of Blaze. It carries your message far beyond any trend that could happen and into recognition on a really deep level. And recognition is what allows your work to compound. So if this conversation feels like it's naming something that you've been seeing or sensing, Chapter 11 in the Marketing for Entrepreneurs book expands even further. And the companion workbook helps you identify your repeatable anchors and build it into your content rhythm. This is how marketing begins to feel less like output and more like identity for you. And when it feels like you, it's a lot easier to share. So imagine someone discovering your work 6 months from now, and they scroll through your posts and they listen to a few podcast episodes and they read your bio, and within minutes, they understand what you believe. They feel extremely oriented because they know exactly what to expect. They feel that they know you because you're so consistent across the platform. And that feeling is built through the repetition that you've been doing. This is not you having some fancier kind of marketing. It's a steady return to what is you, alignment of who you are. That repetition is how your message settles into someone's nervous system and stays long enough to matter. Say what you believe, say it again in a different story, say it long enough for it to become familiar, and then that is where your brand begins to glow. And that glow builds momentum that can last and help build a very successful business. So if repetition has ever felt uncomfortable in your marketing, let this be the permission to stay with what matters. Your core belief is not a headline that you should rotate through. It's a foundation for you to stand on strongly, firmly. When someone hears your message once, they notice it. When they hear it again, they remember it. And when they hear it a third time, they begin to trust it. And when they trust it, they trust you. So if this conversation feels like it's landing somewhere deeper, Chapter 11 inside Marketing for Entrepreneurs Quick Guide to Spark Ignite Your Marketing walks through this in a grounded, practical way. And the companion workbook helps you identify your anchor belief and build a repeatable rhythm around it so you're not reinventing your message every single week. So if you already have the book, open the workbook and spend some time with the repetition prompts. There's something powerful about seeing your own words show up in patterns. And if you don't have the revised edition yet, you can find it on Amazon or download the PDF and companion workbook. The links will be in the show notes. And once you do that, if you download the companion workbook, you will be signed up for our Marketing Magic emails that will go to your inbox as well, including podcast episode updates and behind the scenes conversations just like this one. So if you're listening to this thinking, I know what I believe, but I'm too close to it to shape it, you're struggling with that, that's exactly where the Brand Spark experience comes in. It's why it exists. It's why it's so important. It's a 90-minute working session where we uncover your core message, refine it into language that feels unmistakably yours, and identify the next few best steps, opportunities that will actually compound. You will actually see what is possible for you in ways you never thought possible. You don't need more idea. You need orientation and follow through. Repetition is how your brand becomes recognizable. And repetition and recognition is what turns momentum into something that's really steady and believable and trustworthy. So I'll see you in the next chapter where we'll talk about how repetition evolves to something even more magnetic. So until then, I want you to choose what fits your life and stay with it long enough to see what grows. Wow, what an incredible conversation we just had. I hope that this episode lit a little bit of a fire under you to finally bring your brand to life in a way that feels true to you. Remember, clarity is the spark, but activation is that fire and flame that keeps your message and your visuals and your strategy aligned, and the confidence that follows. So does that lovely thing called momentum that you've been waiting for. So if today's episode, if you loved it, make sure you are subscribed to the Wickedly Branded Marketing Podcast so you never miss an insight or a conversation. Until next time, dare to be wickedly branded.